we used to work with a bunch of small manufacturers, and sometimes they would want to highlight, like, well, we got a new machine. And we were like, neat, right? So help us understand, right, how that piece of equipment is going to do something for your customers.
Hey everyone, this is Bethany Meadows with Time to Thrive. On today's show, you will meet Kristen Sweeney, the word wizard behind Every Little Word, where she helps entrepreneurs stop tripping over their own tongues and start speaking their brand's truth clearly and confidently. Kristen is a messaging strategist with a knack for turning kind of into crystal clear and meh into magnetic. She works with purpose driven business owners to find the words that feel like them and make their dream clients say, yes, please. Whether she's writing behind the scenes or coaching one on one, Kristen brings a warm, thoughtful energy and just the right mix of strategy and soul to every project. Welcome to the show, Kristen.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here with you. I'm
Well, as always, pick a number between 1 and 5, and we will get you started with our super random question.
gonna go with two.
Two. People don't pick two very often for
Pick
some
two.
reason.
All right. Well, hey,
What is one thing you'd wish you spent more time doing when you were younger?
learning to play the piano. That's so easy for me. I was a musical theater performer for many years, but I was not a piano player by nature, and I wish I'd had that background.
Yeah, my brother was one of those people who like he was really good at sports, like really good at sports. And but he would practice all day, every day. Like he would walk around the house doing a sidearm pitch and mentally doing I didn't have that. I was way too all over the place.
Interested in too many things.
Yes.
Yeah, a little bit everything. I can relate. I can relate.
Well, tell us a little bit about I said every little word, but people probably don't know what that means. So why don't you tell us about your company and what you do?
Yeah, we run a boutique. So I run a boutique content and communications agency. So we are really specialists in the written word format, mostly by helping companies create content that is reflecting the expertise they already have inside of their organization. So we spend a lot of time working with executives, subject matter experts, technical leaders, folks who have a lot of complex ideas and a ton of knowledge inside their brain, but that knowledge needs to get translated outside of the work they're outside of their heads first, outside of the work they're doing inside the organization, and made more visible. So we help create content programs that are going to bring that expertise forward, to build credibility, build visibility for organizations.
I also operate a marketing agency and we do a lot of brand work. So I love the topic of brand. That's my love language. But do you find, like I find this, but maybe I just wonder if it's just me. Do you find that the smarter your client is, the more difficult it is for them to speak in a way that other people get?
It can be, certainly. I don't know if it's about smarter. We've worked with many, many clients who are engineers and technical experts, and I definitely find that, like, it takes some trial and error. So, kind of finding the right buttons to push that can sort of unlock that thing for them. And one of the things I think is challenging about technical experts is helping them understand, like, at what level they need to speak with you, right? Like, I'm not a first grader in my understanding, but I'm not your peer either. And so, kind of helping as we speak with them, really making sure we're creating one, like a safe environment where they feel comfortable just sort of expressing themselves ad hoc and as they wish. And then two, like, really engaging in dialogue to figure out where we need more from them, where we need less from them. And that requires a lot of kind of thinking on your feet during that conversation. Sometimes being really candid when you don't understand something or you'd like them to explain it a different way. So, yeah, it can definitely be challenging. And I think that, we've seen that it can also be really rewarding for folks like that on the other end to sort of
Yes,
feel understood or to look at something that they consider marketing material and to say,
right.
like, I can't believe that this thing could be created that actually still captures me and like represents me well and my
Yeah.
expertise well, but also is achieving the kind of external goals of the organization. And that's like really gratifying for
For
experts to see.
sure,
I
for
feel like
sure.
that bridge is possible.
Yeah, I think a lot of times it's they have so much that they can put into something. It's like, I always use the example too of like working with a small business owner on a quarter page ad, and they want to say everything that they do in this quarter
Yeah,
page ad. And,
yes.
we got to remember what the objective is. And if the
Mhm.
objective is for the people, our audience to understand a particular concept, that's the goal.
Thinking
And
about that rule of one, right? Can
yeah,
this be one thing?
exactly.
And like, that's a great idea. That's a different article. That's a different ad. That's a different topic,
Yeah,
different white paper,
work on
Yeah.
that next. So let's talk about brand a little bit. How do you define brand voice, and why is it so important for small business owners to find that?
Yeah, so it's really interesting, and I think it's important to put it in the context of small business owners because sometimes, uh, there's kind of like the ideal way that something might get done, right? And the ideal way is that there's been a series of exercises, and there's a very well developed kind of company level brand voice and a tone of voice and all of those things. And let's face it, many small businesses don't have the resources to create that. They don't have the time, they don't have the budget to undergo some tens of thousands of dollars massive exercise to generate a what they see as like a document, right? So a lot of times what we found is that depending on the structure of the organization, a bit of a shortcut to that is to look at who is that forward facing person. And more often than not, and I'll even use myself as an example, like I lead a team of 4 plus some freelancers. Like, let's face it, my voice is the voice of the brand. And so it can kind of become a shortcut in a lot of ways. Like if the CEO is the one who's out there for marketing and sales, they're the founder of the company. By tapping into conversations with them directly, I find that we can have this approach that captures what the voice of the brand is. This is the voice of the brand as it ends up sort of being distributed across the company. It's what it feels like in the customer experience. Um, Without kind of saying we need to back up and do this massive engagement to think of something at a company level. That can absolutely come and is important at a certain point. But often I find like tapping into the people who really represent the company is, in many cases, honestly, a proxy for the voice of the brand itself.
Yeah. A lot of times I find that you can learn a lot from mistakes because, the things that not to do help you figure out what to do. Are there some common mistakes that people make when it comes to messaging and their brand?
Number one, I would say is they focus on themselves. They want to talk about who they are and what they do and why they are special. Um, and there's a certain amount of truth in the fact that some small businesses just need more touches with customers, right? Like if they just heard your name more times, that would incrementally give some
Right.
benefit, right? Um, but especially when we're thinking about creating some kind of piece of long form content, like we're always talking with our clients about like, well, why did you okay, you say I want to write about this. Does your customer care about that? Can we make them care about it? Can we find a connection? Why should they care? We used to work with a bunch of small manufacturers, and sometimes they would want to highlight, like, well, we got a new machine. And we were like, neat, right? um, so help us understand, right, how that piece of equipment is going to do something for your customers. And then, you're unlocking something like, oh, well, actually, we have a whole new capability, or, oh, actually, our turnaround times are going to be dramatically shorter, or, oh, actually, we are able to keep things in house versus outsourcing to a partner. And here's all the reasons that's really great. And so once we can tap into that, then we say, like, sure, we can write about your new machine because we understand how that's going to have an impact on the customer. And that's really what we
Why
really
people
care
will
about.
care.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. That's such a great example. Um, a lot of times too, entrepreneurs by nature are a little ADD anyway. They're kind of all over the place, chasing the squirrels and the shiny objects and things like that. So if someone feels like their brand messaging is quote on all over the place, what's a way that they can, get it to center? How do they what's the process of going from all over the place to a clear, concise message?
Oh, this is so good. So, one of the things that we do is essentially run what we call a content assessment. So it's kind of an audit, and whether you hire someone to do it or not, really this idea that you need to kind of like pull everything together in one place and look at it first. I believe in really understanding what you have before you go and try to make a change, right? Because you will so often things that aren't quite right or a little bit messy are like partial truths, right? So I don't necessarily think you should discard everything and start over completely. You should look at what you have and figure out what has been working or what still resonates with you. So like bringing everything into one place is kind of the first step. It's like uh the book The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up. I don't know if you've ever read it, but the first thing she says to do is, so it's about how to like clean and organize.
It
And the
it
first
sounds like a book I would like.
thing
I'm a little crazy that way.
So she says, like, okay, if you're going to organize your clothes, you need to go around your whole house. You need to go into your coat closet and you need to go at the front where you have your rain boots and you need to bring all of that, like, literally into one room together. Don't go by room, bring all the same type of stuff together. So I really like that philosophy. So that's obviously a first step, figuring out from there once you have everything in one place, what you like, what you don't like. One of the more straightforward, I won't say easier things to do, I think, is really language changes a lot. Cleaning up visual brand identity, and this is not necessarily my wheelhouse, but I think it's so important, is really valuable. So just making sure, like, does everything have like the same colors, the same version of your logo? Does it have a similar kind of visual language to it? Because right away, even if the messaging is still under construction, you're starting to present something really consistent on behalf of your brand visually, which has its own sort of resonance with your audience. And then as far as messaging, I think it can be really important to get outside perspective. I know with my company's messaging, we're always evolving. I've always, to your point, got like the next best idea about what we should be talking about. I'm never fully satisfied with it. Uh, and I rely on my team a lot. I rely a lot on external support and like getting some perspective on it. And then talking to customers, I think, again, going back and saying, like, what do you perceive as our differences? What do you really value in our work together? How are we sort of unique versus other solutions? And I think it's not easy to take all those different pieces of data and then synthesize it into one message. It's really, challenging. It's hard. Um, but I think first kind of collecting all the different information from different places and then starting to look for those patterns that might emerge. I will say too, I have found that it was only so long before one of us brought up AI. I think it can be actually a really good kind of partner for this kind of dialogue. Um, it helps take some of the emotion out of it, right? It can kind of like feed it all of your thoughts and let it reflect back like patterns and specific things that it might see. So those are some steps I would take to start kind of streamlining and simplifying.
You touched on this just a little bit, but I'd like to go into a little deeper. Right? And there's a difference between writing content and writing on brand content. So, can you explore that a little bit more?
Yeah, it's
As
really
you know,
interesting.
all content is not created equal.
All content is not created equal, and where my head kind of goes right now is a lot of the move away from so much of this kind of top of funnel content that like could go on any site that's like what is term, right? As we're seeing with generative AI, we're seeing kind of the landscape for search changing. We're seeing a move away from that generic content. It's just not seeming to have the same impact as it once did to drive web traffic and therefore, ultimately revenue. um, so to me, on brand content is it could like two companies could write about the same topic, but what makes it different, again, this is why we rely so heavily on some kind of expert perspective because the way company A A's expert might talk about it or think about it is just a little different from company B. And those differences are ultimately why your customers are choosing to work with you, why they're choosing to partner with your organization versus a competitor. So for us, it really comes back to leaning into the expertise within the organization. We work with a lot of service-based businesses, or organizations where the people, and I mean, I think this is still true in most companies, the people are driving kind of the culture, the atmosphere, the customer experience. So bringing that back into the content is going to help align it to the brand so that a customer is reading something, and then when they get on a call with sales or they start to get into delivery for their engagement, it's becoming a consistent experience. They're not hearing some generic point of view and then all of a sudden like hearing a totally different take by the time they actually start working with a business.
Yeah. I my take on that too, when you mention AI, what my brain goes to is the thing that is most uniquely you as a business owner is your story. And not just your brand story, but the story of you.
Yeah.
The things that happen to you on a day to day and how it relates to the way you do business. That's something that AI will never be able to write for you.
Hmm.
It can help you polish it and make it,
Yeah.
present it more with more clarity. But I think that that's where your real, genuine, authentic self kind of comes through is in those stories.
Absolutely. And to your point earlier, especially with technical folks or folks who maybe aren't used to kind of being in the limelight, right? Like it can take some
Yeah.
doing to help them understand like, yeah, that's what I want to hear about. Or,
Right.
oh, this really detailed example of this concept. Like the broad brush is great, but it can feel a little jargony sometimes. But all of a sudden, you make it real with this very specific example, and you thought I wouldn't be interested in hearing about that at all. But in fact, that's the
Right.
nugget that's going to make it click for your slightly less technical audience, who's going to now understand. Oh, I know what you're talking about. I see how it applies. I can relate it to my own needs, and that can be really powerful. And yeah, getting folks to go one layer deeper than that even, which is to think about themselves and their own experience set. Some people are more used to doing that than others for sure,
Yeah.
but there's a lot of value.
Yeah. Well, that's a great point because transparency feels vulnerable, makes people feel
Mhm.
vulnerable. And it's not necessarily anything to do with your personality. You could be an introvert or an extrovert. A lot of extroverts never go below the surface, right? They keep things close to the chest that are personal. But I think a lot of times if you can, draw on an experience, like even I have 7 kids. So that's a wealth of story right there.
Yes.
So I can, talk about a time that one of my kids, struggled with something or overcame something and then tie it into a business situation. And it makes me more human. And it makes this, what I'm trying to explain more interesting.
Mhm.
So I love stories. I'm all about stories. But sometimes no matter what we do, no matter, how great our message is or whatever, it comes down to, are we offering the right thing? So what are some signs that maybe the messaging isn't working and we need to look at something else
Yeah,
in the
so
equation?
one of the things I flag that I'll sometimes talk about is, I call them like comment wars. So you know that something is off when, and I've made this mistake and I'm better at spotting it early now, but the kind of sign where it shows up is like a piece of content is sort of being used as a proxy for figuring out the point of view within an organization. And you have multiple experts in there and they don't really agree, and um you aren't really sure, like, whose opinion am I going with? Who's right here? Who is supposed to like arbitrate this? So sometimes there is a tendency to kind of want to jump to the end product and use that as a like a battleground for figuring out what you really think about something. And it's unproductive. It can, I guess, be useful in the sense that it can highlight where a problem is if you didn't know that already. But usually that piece of content, there's a good chance it's not going to see the light of day, and it can, like, as far as the content process itself, creates a lot of extra headache. It's not really the right setting for it. Um, but that's like one place I've seen that sometimes with like groups of consultants in an organization where everyone's bringing a different background and they haven't necessarily like figured out as a company what their stance on certain things is.
Mhm.
That's one I've seen pretty often where something's just not working. I mean, obviously, you want to be tracking metrics that align with your goals for content that you're creating for your content programs. Um, I think the one caution, and if you aren't seeing metrics align with your expectations and you feel that you've set those expectations reasonably, which can sometimes be a challenge, then that's an indication that something isn't working. It may be the content itself, it may be the messaging itself. Sometimes it ends up being, I would say, more of things related to the distribution strategy, or you're not getting enough eyeballs, or you aren't doing that engagement to support your LinkedIn content the way that you could be. And so there are like these pieces around the edges that can sometimes detract. Um, Sometimes I find it is easier to kind of blame the content in a way, like to blame the message,
Yeah.
or this wasn't the right topic, this didn't resonate. And um
Well, I can give you an
or
example because I think when it comes to, like, business owners that are in the trenches, right?
yeah.
They don't always see the forest for the trees, so to speak, if I can be cliche for a second. So, for an example, we had a sushi restaurant, very high-end sushi restaurant that we were working with. They were struggling. They just didn't have any people coming through the doors. So we ramped them up, got that happening and got people through the doors. Well, they didn't ramp up the same time we did, so they weren't prepared for their own success. And
Yeah.
so the experience when people came through the door was that service was super slow. The food was great, but the service was slow, took forever, so the experience didn't align with the message. And so then people don't come back because they feel like they've been lied to. So I think I guess my point is I think it's important to have the right message, but ensure that the right message can be delivered upon. Because if you give people that message and then don't deliver, they feel lied to. And now they don't trust you.
There's I really agree with that. And uh I have been asked by clients like, "Well, here's, X topic, like, what should our take be on this?" And I'm like, "Well, how do you really feel about it?" Because they're gonna find a client is gonna find out how you feel about it. So we shouldn't try and do the take that we think will go viral or be more, amenable. Like, you should say how you feel and what you would do. And sometimes, to your point, that can come with limitations. We were just having a client call the other day with an organization, and there are some very specific limitations that they have operationally, and they've been very upfront about it. And you know, we are looking at how can we highlight the great things about what they do, wonderful things about what they do, but we're very aware that like we can't misrepresent this piece that is a limitation. We have to be like straightforward about it, and to the extent that we can kind of present it in the best possible light, that's what we're there to do. But I don't I definitely don't agree, like bait and switch is worse than never hooking at all, you know?
Yeah, right. That was a good line. Yes, that's so true. There is a difference between or a balance, I guess, that needs to be struck between being clear and being clever. Like as marketers, when we're writing marketing language, we love a good, clever something, something,
Oh, yeah.
right? Little tagline that's a play on words or whatever. But there has to be a balance there because if we're confusing people because we're choosing clever over clear, like can you talk to that a little bit about what do you have, a process or something that you ensure that things are balanced?
That's a great question. So I have a small story about this. Years and years ago, I wrote a blog, and it really just started for myself, and that is pretty much how it stayed, to be honest. And um, this was really before I had much background in marketing, and I wasn't trying to do anything significant with it. It really was kind of a creative outlet for me.
Yeah, it
Uh,
became like the modern journal
Yeah, yeah,
for a lot of
exactly,
people, right?
exactly. It was like post MySpace, but that kind of vibe. So, I every single post that I wrote used some kind of song lyrics to the point that were relevant, to the point where I would, like, look up song lyrics to songs I didn't even know that felt topical and related and then choose them. And I thought it was just the greatest thing ever, and nobody even knew or cared, and, like, certainly wasn't doing me any favors in terms of traffic or anything else, and so I think about that as an example where it was very low stakes, but, you know, like, I was more invested in something that just, like, tickled me personally than really asking if that was something that benefited my audience. Um, and I'm a creative at heart, so I will say I believe there is a place for doing, like, even within a business context, there is a place for, if you feel strongly about something creatively, that there should be a place for doing things that you wanna do because they make you happy. Like, I think there's at least a little bit of room for that in this context.
I would hope so.
However, um, I will take clarity every time, over cleverness. I think that when sometimes one of the things I see about a default is like, don't be boring. This happens especially in B2B, right? Like, don't be boring. And the flip side is almost like have personality, but that personality to me almost always means like try and be really funny or snarky, like kind of in that vein, and
Right.
have a lot of like asides and jokes. And to me, it comes back to like, great, is that going to be what it's like to work with you? Because if it is, that's awesome. And if you have a really snarky personality in your marketing, and then you're gonna get on the line with a consultant or a tech expert, and you're not gonna have any of that, I'm not sure exactly, like, what there's something there that just doesn't quite align for me.
Disconnect for
Yeah.
sure.
I think more about being interesting, is about the ideas that you share and sharing them in a way that is like well articulated and well thought out. And to me, the opposite of boring isn't like funny, it's interesting. And you can be interesting and quite serious. You can be
Yes.
interesting and very technical. It's all about who you're talking to. So that's, I guess, that's where I would say, you know, we definitely try to infuse the voice of the experts we're leading with, um, and their quirks and some of their little phrases and things like that that naturally kind of become part of the tone. But clarity is first every time. And I think being, there's a matter of personal preference. Personally, if I have to read like a lot of preamble of someone just kind of going on in what I might describe as like personality, like I'm like, just what are we talking about here? Just like, let's cut to the chase. That's just me. That's not everybody, for
Well,
sure.
I think you called it when you said, "Don't be boring, but be clear." I
Yeah.
think if you can achieve those 2 things, you're probably somewhere slightly clever anyway. We had a naming project here recently for a wedding venue that's,
Mhm.
just launching, which was a lot of fun, and it was a fun the family's last name is Fox, and so they're naming it Fox Haven, the wedding venue, and it's 45 acres and has cottages and a beautiful lake and a swing and a barn and all the things. And stars, I went crazy. I was naming all the things. They have a vineyard, and there's a behind the vineyard. This like overlooks the lake, and it's just beautiful. And I called that location Vine and Vow. That's the ceremony location. Well, I went crazy on all the naming, and on some of them, they just said, "We just wanna call it the barn because that's what everybody's gonna call it."
Yeah.
And I'm like, "Okay."
Yeah.
So, sometimes even the client has to, like, put me in check because, like, I have too much fun with all of that stuff and, putting meaning behind everything,
Yeah, yeah,
um,
yeah.
you
Well, it's
know?
like knowing when to, like, it's kind of an editing exercise, right? Like knowing
Right.
what to pare away or, I think about even
I
like
called The Office the waypoint because it's the place where journeys begin, and she was like, "It's the office." Nobody will know what the waypoint means. So, to your point, like, even if you're an expert in it, sometimes your own creativity can get the better of you. So,
Yeah, yeah,
sometimes
fair enough,
being
fair enough.
clear,
Yeah.
but I have fun with it. Um, yeah. So, I thinking about, how often, because brands evolve and they're like a living, breathing thing that because we as business owners change,
Mhm.
right? We evolve and change. And so our brand kind of goes with us. So, how often should we be revisiting our messaging to ensure that we're still on point?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think that anytime, again, a lot of it starts with what's happening inside the business. So anytime you are targeting a new customer segment, if you're trying to go up market, if you're looking at a different industry, if you are introducing a new kind of offering, you want to look at obviously like maybe messaging for that what is new, but also how does that fit into the context of what's happening. So that's one thing. What's kind of bubbling up from more operational, like systemic changes inside your company. The other is looking at trends from the outside. So, like it or not, there are certain phrases or ways of thinking that kind of come and go, right? And so, if you aren't sort of paying attention to that, it's not necessarily being a trend chaser, but saying like this isn't really the way people are talking about this thing anymore. There's a new term. And to your point of like the waypoint versus the office, I think it's a balance of what is recognizable to be clear and then where are we trying to differentiate and be distinctive. If everything is too distinctive, then all of a sudden you're not like relatable. It's hard to latch on to who are you and what are you doing? People need a little bit of that container. So if I say we're a content and communications agency, like then I want to go on and talk about how I feel that we are different and unique and who we can help. But like I've at least given people the container of
Yeah, that's a
I
good
like
point.
I understand kind of very broadly, right, what you can help with. Um so I lost the plot a little bit on my answer. Well, can you remind me of the question? I think I had more to say.
um, one thing that I always find challenging for both the client and for me is when they have multiple audiences that
Mhm.
aren't really that related to each other. And that does happen where it's valid, but it's also completely different audiences and
Mhm.
multiple.
Mhm.
So let's talk about the challenges around messaging for that kind of scenario because I know a lot of I know when I get to business owners, they're like, we have no idea how to talk about us. Everyone we try and talk about us, they're confused about what we do.
Yeah.
Um, and that's part of the reason, is because
Yeah.
they're trying to say all the they're switching back and forth between what they do for different audiences, and then it gets, "What do you do?" You know, there's
Yeah.
that confusion. So, maybe talk a little bit about how we can achieve clarity in those situations where we have different audiences that are, um, that we're providing different things for.
Yeah. So I think there are kind of 3 philosophical ways I would think about it, and I will try to keep track of all 3. The first is it may be a sign that your business needs to continue to evolve to be more specific. I think that's definitely possible.
That's a good point.
So sometimes it's not a matter of saying I need to, rearrange my website or something to like look a certain way so it's easy to navigate. It's like why, so maybe you're digging back into the metrics like are both of these equally lucrative in terms of revenue? Are both equally profitable? Like what do we see kind of coming up trend wise? Should we be leaning more in one direction or the other? Should we go all in on one of these audiences? So, like, just a flag that if you feel that friction, it's worth a closer look. And some of that might be you are evolving in that direction and you're kind of like, you know, navigating it in the moment and eventually you wanting to move in a specific direction, but you're not there quite yet. And let's be real, that happens all the time in small businesses. Um, so the second thing is thinking about whether there is a through line you haven't considered that actually connects your audiences. Um, so, let's say you work with 3 different industries. Is there something those industries have in common that you can kind of top level use to unite the messaging? I think this is like it can be really valuable. Sometimes you can try too hard with it and it can feel a little too forced. So it's worth knowing like if that doesn't feel like a perfect fit, maybe there isn't, right? Maybe there isn't a narrative thread and maybe it's just the way your business has the history of your business and how it's developed and they are kind of unrelated things. But if there is a thread that connects them, I think that can be helpful for overarching messaging. And then the third thing is kind of really, to your point, bringing a lot of clarity into how you are segmenting. So, best example, you've seen website having industry sectors on your page, having very specific services, having a landing page that articulates the benefits to each of your different segments. Maybe on your website, it's are you this audience or this audience? And then depending on what button they hit, they get a
Yep.
different journey. So, like thinking about kind of user experience and how you can guide people to sort of straddle that and make it there's a little bit of a self-selection process, but then they kind of are opting into one sort of journey over another. So those are the 3 things I would say.
Right. We started working with a nonprofit last year, and they provide education, mentoring support, for people to live better lives. That's as generic as I can say it,
Yeah,
but it's much more complicated underneath.
sure.
And so I've got them now narrowed down to individuals, parents, and organizations because they partner with organizations
Mhm,
who are working with their groups,
mhm.
their audiences, and they provide resources to those organizations. So I've got them down to 3. So like you say, you can go to their website and you can click on, are you an individual, a parent, or an organization? And you can have a different journey.
Yeah,
Um, and then, and then you have to, and now they're expanding to teens, underserved youth as well. So well, I'm going to treat them as an individual for now.
yeah.
Because I think when you're like, wait, you have 8 or 9 in your head as a business owner. These are all the people that I'm doing business with. Sometimes it helps to just group them. Like,
Mhm.
let's try and group that, and like you say, put a container around.
Yes.
So individuals is a very broad group, um, but it's a way that we can talk to them without being all over the place. And really just having too many journeys.
I am one of the things that I've really, really learned as a business owner is the the way in which my business can be more focused than me. And I think because I started as a freelancer who, it expanded into a business for so long, the business was sort of synonymous with like my own personal curiosity and I want to learn about everything. So I'm like happy to take on a new industry or a complex client and something I know nothing about. And that's great. But as I started to build a team, as I started to need more, external marketing, it became clear to me that like I don't need to rely on I can be a whole person with all of those interests and still run a business that is more focused. And honestly, we're still on that journey. There's a good chance 1 to 2 years from now, we won't serve as many industries as we do today. Um, but being able to say, like, I can like all sorts of things and still choose fewer things for the business itself and separate that from me and my own personal interests, or me feeling like, but I could help anyone. That's great. It might even be true, but
Right.
I'm better off. The business is better off if we only help some segment
Right.
of those people.
Yeah, niching down is really hard for most business owners, even ourselves, right? Because if someone calls us, we can imagine saying no. No, no, I can't help you. Um, I don't think I've ever said that. But I have said now, you may not be the best fit
Mhm.
with the way we do business.
Yeah.
So, I think to your point, I think that's great to be self-aware,
Yep.
as a business as to where your sweet spot is and where you thrive and what serves you as the owner the best. As I get older, I'm also looking for ways that I can impact a larger number of people, scale without it scaling hours. Because when you sell time, there's only so much of it.
Mhm.
So you start thinking about maybe different ways of doing business too to
Yeah.
kinda help with that. This has been great conversation. If there was 1 or 2, like, if nobody remembers anything from this conversation except these 1 or
Oh
2
god.
things, what is most important for them to remember?
Let's see. I'm going to reflect a little bit on our conversation. I would say for me, it's really about that piece of letting your marketing be a reflection of what's happening from the inside. And I think there are a lot of things that come from that. But you're automatically going to have this alignment with your delivery and your customer experience. It's going to be aligned. It's going to feel truer for the people who have to go give that elevator pitch out there in the world. Um, so that's like the one thing I would take away is that thinking of marketing not as some image you have to spin up for yourself
Yeah,
as much as figure out and identify and kind of like put containers around what you are already doing, what your points of view are, what is making you different. Most of that's already happening. You just have to find a way to see it and then show it.
great. Great way to end the show. Where can people find you, learn more about you?
Yeah, absolutely. You can find me on LinkedIn. My website is everylittleword.co, or you can check me out on LinkedIn.
Perfect. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.